All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Going Live with Good Soil, episode number 74. Myself and Matt Smith. We've been doing this for, I think, 74 weeks in a row now. Maybe we missed one week. I can't remember, but we've been doing it for quite a while. And it's been a nice weekly check in with the markets. And we've been, for the last 30 or so weeks, we've been doing it live on our YouTube channel and on Spaces. Previously, it was just our YouTube live channel. So, we're broadcasting this live both on Spaces and the Good Soil Investment YouTube channel. And so the disclaimer on our YouTube channel shows that none of this is investment advice. And we just want to remind people on Spaces that, we're not registered advisors at this time, especially. And this is just our own opinions and not investment advice. So, Matt, how's it going? How's the week going? How's things starting? You want to kick us off a little?
Yeah, I mean, we're stable to slightly up on Tesla, which is, relatively good news over the past like 74 weeks that we've been doing this. It seems like the vast majority have been down rather than up. So, yeah, relatively speaking, I think doing well. But yeah, it's been a wild ride this year for sure.
Yeah. And we usually kick things off talking about the macro markets and such. And so I guess that's been driving the Tesla stock price in the overall markets for the last year or so in particular. And it's mostly downwards for the growth tech stocks, obviously, including Tesla. So that's why we've seen a lot of down weeks. And so we are sort of forced to try to become very astute on what's going on in the macro markets in this last year, especially. And so we always kick things off now talking about that first. And I don't know, that includes geopolitical events as well as the Fed, especially. And we'll talk about these things. So the big thing everyone's been talking about is the China protests from the COVID shutdowns in China. I mean, there's tons of video footage cropping up and of protests. And, I'm trying to get a feel for, is it just like, a couple of isolated incidents, at the Foxconn factory for Apple and a couple places in Shanghai or whatever, or is this spread out across like the entire country, all the metropolitan areas in the country and of China, and is there like literally hundreds of thousands or millions of people protesting, and is it becoming bigger quickly or not? And it's hard to tell. So I don't really know. I've talked to a few people that seem to have sources, and I get mixed answers. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, so I've been thinking a lot about this because I have some history with China and Chinese. I studied Chinese language and have taken several trips there. I was living there for a couple months about a decade ago. Um, and there's just like public protests are not really a thing in China. I mean, most of the public is really supportive of the local or of the CCP. Um, and one thought came to mind, like this old memory that I'd kind of stored away. I was visiting Tiananmen Square, I think probably 20 years ago, somewhere around then, when I was in high school,
Mm-hmm.
and some protester like just started like throwing pamphlets up in the air and was like saying something. I couldn't tell exactly what they were protesting. And like
Mm-hmm.
pretty much as soon as I noticed this happening, the person was like shoved into a van. All the pamphlets were like scooped up. I don't know by who, and
Mm.
it was just like gone. So and it was.
Wow.
I remember like asking our teacher, who was like a U.S. citizen, like what happened, and she
Mm.
would not talk about it. Even when we were back on U.S. soil, she would not talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
So that incident kind of put in my mind this idea that like, okay, like the Chinese government has absolute power, and the people there, like I spoke to a lot of people, and they like, even in candid conversations, they were extremely supportive, like almost shockingly supportive of
Hmm.
the national government. So the fact that you have these sorts of what looks to be like mass protests, I've seen some videos, not very many, but a few, is like deeply shocking to me, because this was like my memory is one protester immediately scooped up and probably like thrown in some work camp somewhere or
Yeah.
like re-educated or something like that. And so I think it is really a big deal that you do have people like at their breaking point just saying, I don't care anymore, this zero COVID policy has to stop. Like that alone is a big deal, regardless of like how widespread it is or not. But
Yeah.
it is hard to tell,
The
exactly what is
magnitude.
going on the ground. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. The great Chinese firewall, really obscures things. I remember the COVID, initial COVID outbreaks in Wuhan, seeing similar types of citizen journalism coming, creeping out of China, and you couldn't quite tell, is this people trying to create, panic, or is it actual real stuff going on beyond an isolated, hospital, long line of people coughing, waiting to get in and stuff? And it just feels eerily similar looking at the images or videos coming out of China the last few days with the protests. Not that it's going to result in, a worldwide contagion of some sort. Of course not. It's a very different thing, but it's
Yeah.
just hard to tell what's going on behind that great Chinese firewall. And it feels like there's something to what's going on more than just a couple isolated incidents. Now, what does that mean for markets? That's what our job is. Like, what does this mean for the macro market? Is it a geopolitical risk similar to like Ukraine being invaded by Russia, where the whole market kind of like didn't know what to do and kind of crashed a little bit further and commodities spiked up and such? So is there going to be some kind of shock to the markets in some way if the unrest in China unravels further to like massive like countrywide protests by everyone under the age of 30, like going in the streets and like,
Yeah.
do you think that the macro markets would respond to that in any way? What do you think, Matt?
So if that did occur the way that you're suggesting with like, mass protests and like a government crackdown that's like, kind of, I think you and I were talking about this yesterday, like a
Yeah.
Tiananmen Square, 2.0 type of
Yeah.
thing. To me, that just seems highly unlikely. From a
Mhm.
lot of the kind of reports from anonymous sources that we're hearing out of the CCP, it does seem like the government is trying to find like a way to both claim victory and back off from the zero COVID
Yeah.
policy.
They had that
So
emergency meeting yesterday. I don't know if you saw the reports of that, right? So they're saying like,
yeah, and
yeah.
it was not quite like a backing off the way I think some people were expecting.
Mhm.
But there was I would say a little bit of a like softening of some language. I forget the exact verbiage that was used, but
It was
reading
like
between
we're making the local government, municipal governments more, giving them a reframing to ease up when needed, not be like a one
right.
size fits all for everyone and try to be a little more understanding or something like
Right.
that.
Yeah, and it was kind of interesting the way they kind of like threw the local governments under the bus. It's like,
Yeah.
well, of course Beijing has the right policy. It's just been
Yeah.
implemented wrong by the locals. Like
Yeah.
it's kind of hilarious.
Yeah.
Um, but it does seem to be the case that like the Chinese government does want to kind of back off some of the more kind of draconian um policies that they've had in place, and so maybe
Mhm.
they couch that in oh, like it's been the local governments that have screwed up all along, and Beijing is going to come to the rescue and
Yeah.
give more clear guidance on how these policies, which haven't changed because we don't make mistakes, like
Yeah.
should be
Yeah.
implemented.
Yeah, I think it's sort of most likely a pivot point. Like you said, it's not a reversal by any means, but it's sort of like a hesitation to not like go harder core on the COVID. Like any dissidents will be squashed. It wasn't like that. They were
Yeah,
trying to emphasize that. They were just like, let's be more understanding and reasonable and how we implement these things and such. So I think it's sort of
yeah,
like a pause and or pivot. Similar to what we're expecting. The other, the worst case, if there was mass protests, I think the macro markets around the world could really get, a little panicky given how big China is to the global economy. If there's, if factories are being
hmm
shut down and supply chains, global supply chains are interrupted further, like beyond what COVID did, then I think the global macro markets will get shaken. But I don't think that's likely here. I don't know what the
yeah.
percentage is. Maybe 10 to 25% chance of that, which is low, but it's not impossible in my mind.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of funny, like all the crap that Tesla has seen lately, like around all like Elon being unreliable or just too flippant on Twitter or his attention's not there. Like
Yeah.
meanwhile, the Foxconn factory that supplies Apple is like legitimately like an urban warfare zone,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
Apple's lowering their guidance on
It's
how many
modern day
iPhones will be
slave labor over there. Yeah, it's crazy.
like how is Apple skating by like
I don't get
under
it.
this regime? It's so crazy to me that like Elon gets all this hate, and Apple just like skirts by with this pristine reputation, which I think is completely
Yeah.
unfounded. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
It is crazy. That we'll get into that. Yeah, but the other big macro events going on is Powell is speaking tomorrow. Um, Last time he had a major speech in between policy decisions that was sort of pivotal, everyone thought, I feel like, was Jackson Hole, and we all know what happened then. But there was a rally kind of leading up to that speech, and then he had changed it reportedly 2 days before the speech, maybe in response to the rally. I don't know. I'm just speculating. But there was a rally of, in the summer of the markets leading up to that speech, and that speech totally put it out and reversed course on the markets. This time, there's not really a rally going up to this speech. I think the S&P is up like maybe 4 or 5%. It's mostly just traded sideways, let's say, for the last S&P has, not Tesla. Tesla's been down the last couple months, but I think the S&P has been mostly sideways for a couple months now. And Powell is speaking tomorrow, so I'm curious. I mean, this is like a big event, and then 2 weeks from then is the CPI print and the FOMC meeting. That's the next big event. So tomorrow, I kind of am nervous that the market could go up or down, 5 or 10% by the end of the week based on how he talks tomorrow. That's
Oh,
my
really?
my
Okay.
my gut feeling. Like
So,
that's like my
so you
50-50
think
odds.
there's
That it's gonna
a
go up or down 50%, 5 to 10%. I think there's a 50% chance. The other 50% chance is the market goes up or down, 1 to 3% for the rest of the week or something like that. But which isn't much, just
so
normal noise.
I'm curious on the downside. Like I kind of see the upside volatility, but on the downside, like they've already been
Yeah.
incredibly, restrictive and very aggressive talking points on where policy is going from here. What do you think would cause, like, what could Jay Powell say that would cause like 5% downside this week?
I think if he doubles down further on raising rates, like not necessarily saying, keeping the door open to 75 basis point hike again, that's possible. Like everyone's pretty much assumed it's going to be 50 basis point hike at this point. But if he says it's possible, we might even do 75 basis points again, and we're looking at the data, and the data we have says the terminal rate needs to be higher. We think, could be, 6 or 7%, and we're just going to keep having to raise it until we know inflation's under control. If he goes talking like that, then I think the market has to reprice the long-term, yields, and the equities take a bigger valuation hit, right? Because the discount value of equities has to be adjusted, and everyone just gets in front of that trade and starts shorting the market, and it just creates a little bit of a unexpected downdraft to the market, 5 or 10% down pretty quickly is my thought.
Yeah, I hope not, but I suppose if he's, very kind of adamant about the rates will be higher longer than people expect, and that's like his main talking point, I could see that, being the case. But it does seem like the economic data in the last month or two has really been softening quite substantially. So hopefully
Yeah.
there's a kind of reversal, but
We
or at
thought
least a
that leading
softening.
into the Jackson Hole meeting too. Remember they
We've
had that
thought that all year.
they had that CPI print that was similar to this last one, better than expected, and we thought going into that it was going to be the pivot point, but he reversed. It was the opposite. So
Jackson Hole is like when everything went downhill. It was just like everyone kind of thought they understood what he was thinking, and then it was just Jackson Hole came, and it's like, oh, completely different Jerome Powell
yeah,
than what we've been seeing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But at least some of the other Fed, I don't know what you call them, chairman, governors, whatever, the Fed representatives who have been speaking have been saying more dovish things and saying, it's time to slow down rates or whatever. They're at least the tide seems to be turning on there. And so I think this next FOMC meeting, they're not going to be all aligned. There will be people arguing for 75 basis points, a few hawks, and a few doves, maybe even saying 25 basis points, and they'll probably settle on 50. Most of them will say 50 probably. So that's my guess. So I think that's back to normalcy of how the Fed should be operating, is having, diverging opinions being discussed. And it's been puzzling up to this point where they've all been unanimous on every step of the way. So
Yeah, I did listen to an interesting podcast recently though that kind of talked about how there's a lot of backdoor lobbying that has historically gone on. Like apparently, I didn't know this until I heard this podcast, but Jerome Powell was actually like very much against the whole like zero interest rate policy before he was appointed to the Fed, and then
wow.
like he got in there and whatever happened, he seemed to be kind of corrupted by the group think going on or whatever, and he like became like a huge fan of it, and or at least supported it, even if he didn't personally believe in it. And then now he's just completely reversed course. So I don't know. I've become a little bit more skeptical, or at least critical of the Fed, because it doesn't seem like a truly honest and open debate is what they're after. It does seem like there's a little bit of like CYA, like, oh, well, we all agree that this is what the economy needs. So
Yeah.
therefore like a 50 basis point hike is appropriate.
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit sad that that seems to be the case, but I'm increasingly convinced that that is the case.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's going to be the main driver of Tesla stock valuation for some time, I think, too. I mean, the next few weeks, at least, it seems. All the growth tech stocks are basically following, on the heels of what interest rate uh, expectations are for the
Hmm.
medium and long term. Because the reason for that is because of how valuations are placed on a discount value. What is it? Discount to the present value based on the interest rate
Yeah.
formula. The formula you use the interest rate on. So the higher the interest rates are,
So
the more you have to the more you
the
have to
cost
discount.
of equity,
Yeah,
the kind of cap M model, the risk-free rate increases, which increases the cost of equity and the
yeah,
discount rate for basically all financial securities. And the higher beta stocks, which growth stocks are, obviously get hit harder in those circumstances. So I think
yeah,
that's why we've seen the huge movement that we have. And like meanwhile, utility stocks are trading at PEs comparable to to like Tesla and growth stocks, and it's just like,
it's insane.
oh, it's so crazy. But and so then if you adjust that by like cutting those by the long-term growth rate, the PEG ratio is what that is. That to me is like the most underutilized metric at this point, because the
Yeah,
sectors are like wildly giving wildly different valuations right now. And so I think like short energy, short like utilities and kind of along some, I don't know, middle market in a small handful of growth stocks is possibly a winning formula, but not investment advice.
yeah. I mean, the way I think of it is a simple way that helps for anyone kind of new to trying to figure out what this all means with interest rates is like if you're a multi-billion-dollar pension fund manager and you need to try to get a certain return on your $10 billion of equity capital for California retirement teachers or whatever fund, then if interest rates are at zero, you can't put it in fixed income and get that return to get the pension paid, right? So when interest rates are at zero or close to zero, you got to be doing other things more actively, putting it in, dividend stocks, but also a combination of growth stocks, that you expect to grow to a certain amount in a certain time that you can sell later for an average of X percent return over those years. But when fixed income rates go up to like 5 or 10%, like they are now, suddenly, now you have a whole new basket of a way of diversifying that $10 billion, and you take a ton of it out of equities and put it in the fixed income assets to guarantee your 10% return, because that makes your job so much easier. Then you don't have the risk of equity markets falling or so when interest rates go up a lot, people have less appetite to take risk in the equity markets because they can get a nice guaranteed return with fixed income, even if it's just treasuries and not corporate bonds, for example. So it's that's sort of the way I think of it to make sense of it.
Yeah.
So anyway, so let's move on to Tesla and Elon. Tesla still trading around $180 here. I mean, it was down to 160 something just last week, I think. And yeah, I mean, there's the big thing about Tesla. I forgot to tell you yesterday in our chat, Matt, is the Tesla semi delivery event on Thursday night. I got an invite and I'm
Oh, did
going.
you?
Yeah,
Nice.
and me and Andrew. I don't know. You remember Andrew?
Oh,
You
yeah,
met him.
yeah.
Yeah. So we're gonna go. I got the raffle invite, the second round of when they did the second round, and so I'm excited to go. But I think there could be uh that could be no one's expecting that to do anything. Like I don't think we really touched on it yesterday
Yeah.
in our prep call. Because
No, we
we
didn't.
sort of we didn't no one's expecting. I don't think any investors expected to really move the needle, but that's a good sign. It's not going to be a letdown no matter what, in my opinion. Like the AI day or Cybertruck unveiling, those things, the Model 3 unveiling, a lot of times the stock crashes 10%
Yeah.
a couple of days afterwards because there's a lot of hope and anticipation leading up to the event for
Yeah,
some reason.
or people would buy like the short-term calls, and the implied volatility would kind of spike around a Tesla event like this, even a delivery event, which like and almost uniformly over the last 3-4 years, the stock has like fallen after these events, or at the minimum kind of been flat. There's been, I
Yeah.
can't even think of a single event other than like a good earnings report, and even then most of the good earnings report, like the stock would fall after them. So
Yeah.
yeah, I I wouldn't want to trade around it, but you're right
No,
that expectations are really, really
zero.
low right now they're zero. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like I wonder how many institutional investors or even retail investors are even aware that there's like that Tesla is going to deliver semis this quarter. Like that's
yeah,
going to hit earnings in Q4.
yeah,
It'll be
yeah.
small, but it's not nothing.
Yeah, it's not nothing, and I think it changes the way people look at transportation. Like, I think it starts the process of people starting to understand that, whoa, this electric semi trucks are real. Like, forget what Bill Gates says; he's not right. They're actually legit. They're here. They're being delivered, and they work. And based on this presentation, Elon and the Tesla team gives, they'll show the vision of what they're going to become with autonomous fleets or whatever. The charging capabilities to go 500 miles with 81,000 pounds, already, and that's going to increase over time. I think with technology getting better, but I think the big picture framing of it is it makes it has the potential to make the entire rail industry obsolete.
Mhm.
Think about it. I mean, trains are a very efficient way to transport things right now. But what happens when you have like a zero, like an autonomous zero fuel cost truck that has millions of miles it can go, per vehicle, and they can drive throughout the night autonomously, and it's much more flexible from point A to point B. You don't need to load things onto trains, load things off with trucks or whatever. You just I think autonomous electric trucks will displace the entire rail industry. I don't see a need for the rail industry once you have these semi trucks all over the place doing things autonomously. I mean, that's big
Yeah.
picture. What do
I
you think?
I think that's right, but I think the Elon did kind of walk down those comments. I forget when it was, maybe about a year ago, when he was talking about exactly this, maybe 3 4 years ago. A- and I think on highways that's right. Like, but
Mhm.
where you can get 5 semis, 10 semis, whatever, 20 semis, why not? Just like following each other in very short, like you can have them like really hugging each other so that like a car can't actually squeeze in. And you can do
Yeah.
that safely as long as the lead car has good vision. Um, but I think the problem is when you like get on the off ramp and you've got all of a sudden got to like turn right, and like that's a whole different um set of driving parameters than what FSD has been trained for. Now, I think
Yeah.
eventually they're going to have enough data where they can really like, just work on that problem. But I think it might be a couple years after FSD beta like enables robo taxis to see that vision come through. But that doesn't mean that it's any less disruptive. I think it's just a different time frame than maybe I was expecting 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, I think the time frame could be the end of this decade, not like in 2 or 3 years
Hmm.
it would disrupt. But I think if Tesla produces enough semis, I think they're shooting for 50,000 a year in 2024. That's like the target. Well, let's say they get to 500,000 a year by 2028 or 29, a million a year by 2030. I don't know. That I'm just spitballing things. I
Yeah.
mean, that's a lot of semi trucks that are being utilized even more often than current trucks because number one, they can drive the autonomous technology. I think will surely be there by then. Like in the next two or
Yeah.
3 years, I think you're right in terms of the autonomous technology. But by the end of the decade, the autonomous driving technology will be so advanced that like there will be no need for a driver. It'll be clear. It's like
Yeah.
perfectly safe. It's like 99.9999999% safe. Like
Yeah.
they'll
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
like it'll be headline news when there's like one fatality from an autonomous truck or autonomous car's fault by that time. It's going to be so good by, in 8 or 9 years from now that, I think that won't be the issue. So I think I saw someone say it'll kill the roads. I don't know about that. I mean, these trucks, while they're heavy and they might hurt some neighborhood, they could be less. They don't have to necessarily be when you have the volume increase. You could lighten the load on them, or you can find the roads that are most capable of handling heavy trucks and just focus on those roads and only go on the side, or the mapping will be so good. The driving directions and mapping will be so good with autonomous trucks that it will be so efficient. Like they can just drive at night when no one else is on the road, even like that could be the max usage or something. And there's just so many ways I think that it can when it's maximized with technology that I don't see the need for the railway industry at that point. I just don't see it.
Yeah,
I
well,
don't
I
know.
mean, if they can undercut rail on cost, and that's
Yes,
an if, but
that's
I
the
think
key.
I think they can, like,
I think they
in the
will.
long term, I
Yeah.
think they can, and I think they will.
You get rid of the
Then
driver and fuel costs, and you have a truck that can go 10,000,000 miles as opposed to 1,000,000 or whatever the current
yeah.
trucks do, or 500,000. I don't know.
Yeah, and so then you can back up each individual car right to the factory, and so then have the workers in the factory unload that. Like that's a huge cost saving
Mhm.
relative to rail, which needs like a massive station, and like things are like loaded onto a truck that has an individual driver, and then that truck like backs itself, to or drives to wherever the final destination is. um the semi has the potential to really undercut that, so I think it's really exciting in the long term. But yeah, I think you're right, it's going to take a
Yeah.
while before the market recognizes that.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and if the market doesn't believe in like autonomy for a Model 3,
Mhm.
it's going to be a bigger point, I think, to convince them of the margin potential long term on like a
Yeah.
rail undercutting semi fleet.
Yeah. I see Major Human in the YouTube comments saying rail will be good for very heavy goods. And that's a good reason to maybe keep the rail
Yeah,
open if, goods that weigh hundreds of thousands of pounds that need to be transported, then those things, railway might be a better application. But yeah, I would say my guess is I'm going to make a prediction 80% of railway will be taken offline by 2032, 10 years from
yeah.
now. That's my
You know,
prediction.
so one of the comment I see here, Dan Roberts says, "Have you ever been on Highway 5 in California? Bumper to bumper trucks already. Much more infrastructure will be needed."
Yes.
Well, if you know anything about like driver incentives, drivers who are willing to travel cross country instead of like in a local region and go back to home every night get paid a premium, and drivers that are willing to drive overnight instead of during the daytime hours are also paid a premium. So if you have autonomous trucks, you
Yeah.
can just schedule them to drive at night. Call it 10 o'clock to 8 in the morning. That's going to be way less traffic, so it'll get there faster. You'll be able to charge on the way at a cheaper rate because nighttime charging is a lot cheaper than like peak daytime charging.
Mhm.
So like I think there's a lot of room to kind of change the economics as we understand them for trucking, and it's a really exciting decade, I think, in terms of
Yeah.
the technology that I think is going to come to fruition. But
What if
market does not believe it right now.
Yeah, I mean, the cost of running the truck is so low with no driver in it, with no fuel costs. What if you even had like a rule where like if there's a bunch of autonomous trucks on a highway and there's a traffic stoppage because of it, that they're forced to pull over to the side and just wait it out and sit there for a few hours until it lightens up and then they go back on. Like that wouldn't be that much of
Mhm.
a cost. I mean, sure, in terms of timing, if someone's trying to get their deliveries, but for things that aren't so time essential in terms of delivering, long distances, there's no driver you have to expense for those few hours on the road. There's a lot less uh, friction in trying to be more flexible with the autonomous electric trucks. I think keeping the roadways smooth,
Yeah.
flowing smoothly. And then you have the trucks, the car. I read a book or a fascinating story, not story, a book or article or something, scientific article about the cause of bumper to bumper traffic, and it's actually because of the brake lights and people pressing their brakes, kind of gingerly at every little nervous point, and it causes like a chain reaction, and then it just
Oh
creates a
my
traffic
gosh.
jam. So when you
Yeah.
have self-driving cars or self-driving trucks, a lot of them on the road, you'll have so much less of that, and I think the roads will be much more efficient just because of that.
That's actually a really poorly understood point, I think, and it's actually why I got interested in electric vehicles in the first point. Is like I used to drive very kind of energy efficient, like
Hmm.
well before, like probably 10 years ago, before I was invested in Tesla or anything. But I remember like there was this one particular stretch of highway where like there was an off ramp, but you had to like go maybe half a mile and then go to another off ramp that would slow down to like 25 miles an hour around this curve. And I
Hmm.
remember like people would be going 75 miles an hour, hit the brakes to go around this one curve, hit the gas to go get like back up to 75, and then slam on the brakes about 5 seconds later just to
Yeah,
like go on this 25-mile-an-hour exit ramp. And I just remember thinking, like, I was really deep into physics at that point. What a waste of energy that is. You're
yeah,
gaining maybe 2 seconds, probably not,
yeah,
on like your trip time, and you are wasting I don't know, a decent amount of gas to do like this braking and accelerating. And I just remember thinking that is so dumb. Like, why not just like keep a bigger space in front of the car in front of you, slow gradually, and if
Yeah.
everybody followed that same sort of mindset where like you just slow, like you accelerate and decelerate very gradually, you can pack cars much more tightly together. You're not going to have as much jerk, which is like change in acceleration, and that is
Mm.
really, to your point, what causes traffic jams.
Yeah.
It's
And
not,
also the rubbernecking traffic jams. You know what the term rubbernecking for traffic jams is?
no, I
You
don't
heard that?
know what is
Oh,
that.
I don't know if it's like my grandfather told me or something. I don't know. It's an old generation thing. But basically, right now, when there's like a police car pulled a motorcycle over on the side of the road, or there was an accident on the other side of the road, then everyone on the side that's fine slows down instinctively to turn their neck and create that little rubber.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Hey,
yeah,
look,
yeah.
and so you're not going to have any of those slow down traffic stops when you have a lot more autonomous cars, because not everyone's going to be, rubbernecking to turn and look what's going on over in the other highway, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, that's been. I can't tell you how many times I've been in that situation where I'm like stuck in traffic for 45 minutes, and then like you finally get, and there's like no lane closure or anything. It's just like the other side of the highway, and people
Yeah,
are just
yeah,
doing
yeah,
this. It's so
yeah,
frustrating. So,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
the
So
future's looking bright.
it's looking bright with traffic, I think. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, and the big presentation tomorrow night is Neuralink. I'm excited for that too. That's not going to affect Tesla, but we'll get an idea of Elon's state of mind, I think, a little bit if he's there presenting with them. So it'll be, and I'm very curious about Neuralink anyway. The future of humanity with
Yeah,
Neuralink is huge. So that's exciting. We don't really cover Neuralink on this podcast, but we'll talk about it from time to time. If there's something crazy revealed tomorrow, I'm sure we'll talk about it next week. But the
you can
FSD
have a
beta.
banana smoothie to celebrate.
Bananas. I will have a banana, chocolate peanut butter banana smoothie, I think. Yeah,
All
that's what
right.
I'm gonna have, like the monkey, the monkey was drinking
Yeah,
that ping pong.
out of a tube, just
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like a good treat. So, uh the next the big thing on our list is the FSD beta wide release, right? I mean, that's
hmm
huge. Do we have any idea of how many people, like there was 160,000 beta testers in the US. Do we have any idea or estimates, do you think, of how many? I think Troy's estimated it and other people have, but what's your guesstimate for how many FSD capable, paid for customers there are in the US? Is it like 300,000, 500,000, a million? What do you think?
Yeah, so the kind of number I'm working off of, and we don't know for sure, but what seems to be right based on the deferred revenue balance that we've seen, as well as kind of the previous history of like uh, deliveries and the implied take rate over time, it looks like there's somewhere around 350,000 like paid users in the United States, um, which is well fewer than the number of hardware 3 cars there are out there.
Hmm.
But I think the math that I've been honing in on for a while, and again, this could be wrong, but I think as an order of magnitude, it's about right, is like about $1 billion of deferred revenue will be recognized in Q4, and then you'll have higher recognition going forward. So I think it's going to be around that $1 billion figure in terms of pre-tax earnings that gets recognized. Analysts, I think, will rightly back that out because it is a one-time benefit.
But
But
one question for
my
you is, in
yeah,
the US, they're probably going to deliver what in the quarter four, maybe 200,000. What do they deliver in the US?
I don't track the
200,000,
geography skills. So
150,000?
150 somewhere in that range. I
Okay.
don't know. Two.
150,000 in the US Q4, best case 170 or 80,000, let's say. I don't know, but let's say 150,000 in the US. How many of those people ordered FSD? We think it's like 15% or something. So that's like 20,000, let's say 20,000 people ordered FSD in Q4. That 20,000 cars with the extra $12,000, or 15,000 or 12,000, I forget.
Well, so it's 15,000, but only half of it's recognized right now. So the
But now
incremental
in
amount.
Q4, wouldn't all of it be recognized for Q4?
Yeah. So that'd be an incremental $150 million, somewhere in that
Mhm.
range,
Yeah.
with the numbers that you just pointed out. So I mean that's not massive
Not
in the grand
nothing,
scheme of things,
but
but I think
it'll
the
catch attention
the
of analysts, I think.
yeah, you have to change your margin assumptions going forward. So let's
Yeah.
assume that the manufacturing margin is constant Q4 to Q3, which I don't think it will be. I think it's actually going to improve because you've got higher output at all factories.
Yeah.
Um, but just assume that like they've you kind of the manufacturing margins stay where they are, well, your gross margin is still going to increase because your software sales, which are 100% margin, are now fully recognizable. So
Mhm.
that's a change that analysts have not baked into their models. So if you have some combination where it's more recognizable and take rate increases, I think it's going to take some time for that thesis to play out, but I think it's a legitimate prospect now that people are like showing it. Like I've been
I
showing it
think
around the holidays to all my friends and family, and people are like blown away by it.
I think
Um,
take rate increases in Q1 and Q2. Like, if it's 15% now, I think in the US it increases to 20 to 25% in Q1 and Q2, just because, like you said, more people are showing it to other people. That's one thing. That's another thing is people now know if they buy it, they're going to get to use it right away.
right.
They don't have to buy
That's
it
a
and wait an indefinite amount of time and be like, I don't want to pay for this. Who knows when it'll be ready? Now they know I buy it, I get it, like instant
yeah.
gratification. And so I think you'll have a take rate much higher potentially, because that could be as high as 30 or 40%. But I'm just saying conservatively, I think 20 to 25% Q2, Q3 in the U and Q1, Q2 in the
Yeah.
US. And then the other like minor addition is, I think tailwind to help take rate is you have the Inflation Reduction Act, which doesn't directly tie to full self driving, of course, but because people are going to get this extra rebate on their car back, they can justify spending up on an
Yeah.
option they wouldn't have otherwise spent on, in my judgment.
Yeah.
And that might be marginally, I don't know, maybe an extra 2 or 3%. I don't know, but altogether, I think it's at least 20 to 25% in Q1, Q2.
Yeah.
Q2 at the latest, we would see that, but I would think we'll see a substantial take rate increase, and that'll, what do you think about that?
So I'm not modeling anyone, and part of the reason I guess is because I was assuming a take rate increase in years past, and it's like the opposite happened. So I'm a little bit
Yeah,
like scarred mentally from being a little bit too optimistic about that.
yeah,
Um, but the other thing is, I've heard some anecdotes about people who bought FSD, and they've been put in like a queue or a wait list, and so I don't know
mhm,
too much detail about that, but it doesn't seem like, at least yet, that people are getting it like right away like that.
mm,
So, and on top of that, there's maybe a 3 month backlog. So even if
yeah,
let's say like somebody, like I show my brother today, he says, "Wow, that's
yeah,
really cool. I want to buy it." It might take him 3 months to take delivery, and
yeah.
then I don't know what Tesla's policy is going to be at that point. Like, are they still like slow rolling the FSD
Yeah.
rollout?
Let's
And
say
if they
Q2,
are,
Q3
then
next year then. Q2,
yeah,
Q3, with the delayed rollout of all that, but I think the take rate increases substantially when people know if they select that option, they get to use it within 100 miles or whatever, within a week of driving their car, and the Tesla insurance score is not terrible or whatever, then they get approved. And they know, if they know that is going to happen, I think how many people have decided not to get it because of that in not knowing when they'll get it, like there's probably so many, like I've had so many friends and family members in the last like year who got Teslas and like, I don't know, should I get this FSD beta? And I explain it to them. I'm like, well, it's really a good deal because in the future you'll get to use it. But it totally puts them off when I'm like, in
yeah,
the future, they don't know like when in the future. I'm like, I don't really know, but sometime I think it'll be
yeah,
next year, but it could be 5 years from now. We don't really know. And they're just like, nah, I don't want to do
yeah,
it. But if I could instead say, yeah, you should do it, you're going to get this cool new feature I use all the time, I bet at least half of them would have selected to pick that up. Like it just
yeah.
makes a big difference when you're making the decision.
Oh, and I remember my old boss actually bought it like 4 years ago or something like that. And I was like, "Well, like, what do you think about it?" And he's like, "Oh, I haven't tried it." And I was like, "What?" Like, and
Yeah.
I've heard James Dalman like make some similar comments about when he's looked at the statistics of like driving compared to the number of vehicles out there. It seems like there's 10% of the drivers who are doing 90% of the miles, and 90%
Yeah.
of the drivers hardly ever use it. So
Yeah.
I think it may
Yeah.
take some time. I'm not. I'm hesitant to assume any change in take rate until Tesla actually starts pushing FSD. And right
Yeah.
now, I think they're really cautious because like it still does dangerous stuff. We were talking about snow last week and some of the issues that it has there. I think there's still enough cases where it doesn't make the right decision, where Tesla doesn't want to push it aggressively. But I think
Mhm.
when they get to the point of comfort where they're saying, okay, now it's really safe, it actually like beyond any shadow of a doubt, it improves driver safety. Then they're going to start pushing it. And I think when they do that, like one of the things we've been talking about for a long time that they could do is just like give every single Tesla owner like a 60-day free trial. And I think
Yeah.
a very high percentage of those drivers will say, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing! I can't live
Yeah.
without it. I'll
Yeah.
pay $300, $400 a month for this subscription to FSD beta. And when they do
Yeah.
that, I think that's when the transformation of the financials, I think, will take place.
Yeah. And the safety statistics are going to tell the story. The results will speak for themselves. And this is a big boon for the safety statistics ramping up in volume of how many miles are being driven with FSD beta enabled on the car versus cars that don't have it enabled, and how many deaths or, accidents happen. I am a big believer that the vast majority of accidents are preventable
Yeah.
if phones were not able to be used. Doesn't mean no one should be able to use a phone in their car, I'm saying, but FSD beta, when it's being used, it pretty much eliminates that risk of looking at your phone, because people are still going to look at their phones. You're not going to be able to stop that. And so when FSD beta is enabled and being used when people are looking at their phones, well, guess what? The car is going to stop for the kid crossing the road,
Yeah.
that you otherwise would have ran into with looking at your phone, or the car is going to stop for the car in front of you that stopped abruptly to stop in front of a deer while you were looking at your phone. So there's
Yeah.
going to be the results will speak for themselves, and that's what I'm excited for too.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, like, just anecdotally, my wife does not have a Tesla. I was driving her car the other day, and something just caught my attention on the side, and I was looking at that for a second. It didn't seem long at all, and all of a sudden, I
Yeah.
realized the car in front of me was slamming on the brakes, and so I like panicked and like
Yeah.
really had to slam on the brakes. And it's like that sort of thing just doesn't happen in a Tesla, like
No.
especially when you're on FSD. Like
Yeah.
a 2 second, lapse in your judgment is like
Yeah.
not penalized in a
If
Tesla,
kids
and it
fighting in the
really,
back seat or whatever, tell them to calm
yeah.
down. Yeah, that happened to me once a long time ago. So yeah, all those things will be prevented. Yeah, when you have
Yeah.
the full self
But
driving.
it's so funny how the commentary is the reverse though. It's like, oh, like occasionally like the Tesla will like be jerky in a lane, so like we've got to ban it. It's like, no,
Yeah,
that's so dumb.
it is dumb. Very so. And Elon, I mean, he's such a big magnet for bashing and criticism now. I mean, I feel for him. He's really sacrificed his life to become this magnet of criticism and bashing for the better of society. Like, he's trying to improve the world. He's not trying to make himself rich to like live on yachts or whatever. He's clearly a different breed of species of some sort.
Yeah.
He's motivated differently, and he's quite capable, the most capable engineer in the world, and, marshal of resources. I mean, what an incredible person to have in civilization. And yet he gets so much, you know, adversity thrown at him, by I think it's all the people's toes he's stepping on. He's stepping on so many toes of so many industries now with Twitter and the media. And
And
it's
picking fights
really
with Apple, and
picking
yeah.
fights with Apple now. I mean, it's going a little too fast for me. I put out like a tweet yesterday, like, "Hey, maybe slow it down a little." Rome wasn't built in a day. Like, you're making a lot of progress, but things can get irreversibly, backfire. Backfire could be irreversibly damaging if it's too strong. Like if Apple suddenly
Yeah.
shuts down Twitter, then that's going to be hard to come back from at this point. It's going to really put Twitter into like a long winter for a while. So yeah, I mean, Elon, I love what he's doing. I fully support him. He's way smarter than me. I think he knows what he's doing. I trust his judgment, but I hope he's taking a look at the big picture as well, and knows that maybe some of his goals can be accomplished if he does things a little more methodically, and
Yeah.
not so quickly all at once. Not ripping band-aids off all at once. What do you
Yeah,
think?
I think that's right. I mean, like I think I've seen a lot of commentary from like people who just think he's got like, you know, ill intentions. Like Jack White had this thing when he got off of Twitter, and he was saying like Elon's just like doing everything he can like for the money, and he's like, putting Trump back on like was, too much. And like clearly Jack White doesn't understand, Elon's motivations, because you and I know that money is not what's motivating, what Elon, but
Yeah,
like, a lot of people who don't follow him as closely understandably don't know that about him. And so
yeah.
like I think people can be forgiven for misunderstanding some of his actions right now. And I think in the context of everything that Tesla's going through right now, and frankly everything that Twitter's going through right now with losing advertisers, and um
Mhm.
I do agree with you that like slowing the pace of change down a little bit might be a little helpful, or at least like being somewhat more mindful of his tone.
Yeah.
Being a little bit more diplomatic, I think would go a long way right now. And
Hmm.
he seems to have no interest in diplomacy.
Yeah.
So part of that's probably his Asperger's. Part of that's probably just that like
He's very
he's got the
principled.
bigger picture in mind, and he's
Yeah.
very principled. And so like if you're fighting the like the like the bad guy, you want to just take a principled stand, but
Yeah.
that's causing a lot of collateral damage, I think, right now. And so I think it would be nice to see if he was just a little bit more cognizant of that.
Yeah. Absolutely. So we'll keep an eye on that. I like what I'm seeing with Twitter, though. I think it's progressing in the right direction. And yeah, like we talked in the beginning, maybe Spaces will be a target to improve soon, which will be exciting. And there's just lots of exciting things to do with Twitter as long as it's still available for people to use and not taken off Google and Apple's app stores. And then we'll all have to be like on PC computers going onto the internet site for Twitter and won't be able to use on our mobile devices, So it's I'm sure yeah, I mean the Tesla phone, I don't think that's happening.
I don't think so either. No,
Yeah, he doesn't want to do that.
I think that was a strategic thing. Like, oh, like of course, if Apple is like tries to pick a fight, then
That's worst case. Yeah, worst
we'll go
case.
like nuclear on them. Like,
But that'll take
I
years
think
to just like
that's a good.
produce, to design and produce. It'll be like 2 years
Yeah,
before it's out in people's hands. A year maybe best with Elon time if he pushes it in terms of Elon time, meaning like him pushing his engineers. But
yeah.
they won't be able.
Well,
It's just yeah, it's
and
not a
Amazon
good time.
tried that. Like Amazon tried and failed to do the Fire Phone, and that actually had like really cool features. I remember taking a look at that at the time, and being like, "Wow, like this is actually like there was a lot of really cool like real world VR, like AR capabilities that they'd built in there, like some pretty impressive stuff." And still, that product completely failed. So even if
Mhm.
Tesla has like an amazing phone that's better than the iPhone, which I think is a big if, but if they
Yeah,
did, like that doesn't mean that it would guarantee success. So I don't think they're going to go down that path.
yeah, yeah. He can't do everything. He's got to pick his
No.
battles carefully from here. I think. I was listening to. It reminds me of that song from Notorious B.I.G. "Mo money, mo problems." Like, and it's true. Like, Elon's getting bigger and bigger, and he's getting more and more problems. And Tesla investors, as we see Tesla grow bigger, not just Tesla, but as we see Elon's, influence on different industries grow, then there's more and more problems that Tesla gets caught in the crossfire on. I mean, you have,
Yeah.
apparently you have some people that are like hardcore, left leaning, politically, that are going to not buy a Tesla because of this, or at least they say that. I'm not sure that's true, but I'm not sure how marginal that difference in demand
Yeah.
actually will be. I'm suspicious of it being more than a few percentage points in total demand, being decreased or something. But some people speculate it could be like 10 or 20% of demand decreased or more, if you're alienating half
Yeah.
the
I
country.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
We'll see, but I just don't think that it's going to be really a meaningful impact based on his.
Yeah.
Like maybe people even feel that now, but then 6 months from now they go to buy a car, they kind of forget about this, and then they look at the specs and say, okay, like for the same price, the Tesla gets 75 miles more range. So like, okay,
Yeah.
cool, I'll go with it. Plus, it's like available now
Yeah.
rather than like wait a year and get like a markup from a
I can't
dealer. So,
imagine. Yeah. I can't imagine them, then their wife saying, but it's Elon. We can't
but it's
support him.
it's
Can't
going to.
imagine
I
that.
bet it's all my money's going to Trump for sure if I
Yeah.
support Elon. There's
Yeah.
probably some small percentage of people who would think that way, but I think
Yeah.
most people are like don't care about it as much or are not following it,
Yeah.
or like the facts of like the product decision will vastly overweigh whatever Elon controversy is existing at the time.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Anything else we want to talk about with Tesla, Elon? Should we go to Q&A now? What do you think, Matt? Anything else we want to
Yeah,
cover?
we've been going on for 50 minutes or so I think we should open it up to some Q&A for 15-20 minutes.
Yeah. All right. Alex behind the scene highlighting some questions from Twitter. Life at 130 beats per minute. I like that username.
Hey Tim.
Uncomfortable question. Is it time to start worrying about Elon's mental health? I mean, I think it's always a question people always have, his mental health. I mean, he did tweet that picture of like the
Yeah. The gun and the like 8 Diet Coke cans or whatever.
Yeah, uncaffeinated, and, I'm not worried about the uncaffeinated Diet Coke cans as much. I mean, lots of people my dad drinks tons of Diet Coke, and we've all our us kids have been worried about him because he used to drink, like, 6 cans a day for, like, years and years. We're like, "Well, that's too much Diet Coke, Dad, you shouldn't be drinking," but he's fine. I don't know, I'm a little nervous about that, but not as much. He could be drinking or taking sleep pills all the time, like I think he used to, but, hopefully he's not doing that stuff. But the gun was a little like, why was that in the picture? Like, what's the purpose? I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. I mean, he tried to make a joke of it like a musket, like Elon Musket. I don't know if that was the purpose of the
Yeah.
gun, but it was like definitely not like a modern gun. It was like an antique gun of some sort. So maybe it was just a joke. I mean, I
Yeah, but,
doubt
like,
he's defending himself with an antique gun.
I don't think yeah, like, so I was in, Sandy Monroe's office, and he had, like, a bunch of antique guns, but they were, like, mounted on a wall, and it was, like, very
Yeah,
clear, like, okay, this guy's not, like, keeping a gun on his bedside table necessarily. It's just, like, he's
yeah,
interested in antique guns. With Elon's, it was a little bit more odd. So
it was
I
odd.
like, to me, that seemed like a pink flag. Like, the
Mm,
I
yeah,
think we've all had questionable tweets from time to time. I know I certainly have. I've had things I've
yeah,
deleted or just been too aggressive on something. So you know, a lapse in judgment, I think there is reasonable to assume. But like all the rest of the stuff, to me, it kind of fits with his mental picture of the world. So it doesn't seem necessarily that like his worldview is changing or his priorities are changing. I think it's just he's picking a lot of fights right now, and it's a particularly volatile period of time. Given how much backlash he's getting with all the changes he's trying to implement.
yeah,
So to me, I'm not super concerned about it right now. If he starts tweeting a lot about, like, I don't know, some random conspiracy theory or something that just doesn't seem to fit with like his like hyper rational worldview that he's communicated so well in the past, that's when I would be a little bit more concerned. Um, but no, to me, I don't think he's on like the Howard Hughes
yeah,
path right now, where he's gonna like just like not shower and like have like super long fingernails in the next
yeah.
20 years.
Yeah, yeah. I see Thaddeus Walker in the YouTube comment saying it was a game gun and a possible replica antique gun. The bottom gun had no trigger. Okay, I mean that's fair. I mean, I'm not a gun expert, and most of us aren't on those types of guns, especially. So maybe it was just an antique gun, but I wonder if there's some symbolism there or something. I don't know, but it's just possible. We're not saying it's definitely a pink flag, but it's just a possible pink flag. Just something to be aware of, right? I mean,
Yeah,
with his mental health, let's just keep a close eye and make sure. I think from a physical health perspective, he seems to be on the right track. I mean, he was doing intermittent fasting or fasting of some sort, and he's talking about sleep being more a priority for him recently, I think. And so I think he's commented on Andrew Huberman's post a few times. So he's apparently taking in health information, which is good, physical
yeah,
health. We need him physically healthy. So as long as he's physically healthy, I'm not
yeah.
as worried about his mental state. It's if he stops sleeping again and he's taking sleeping pills and to sleep, or he's, if stuff like that's happening, then I think the mental health is something to keep a closer eye on,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah, and so seeing a lot of these comments that like the gun didn't have a trigger, it was a toy gun, like that makes me feel a lot better because I didn't notice that. So, the
Yeah,
fact that it actually appears to be, like an actual toy, like that, I do feel a lot better about that.
yeah. Let's go to the next question here. From Anthony 6518 1997 on Twitter. With Starlink currently operating in the mobile phone bandwidth, is now the time to launch an iPhone competitor? I mean, it certainly could be if he's going to do that, but I don't think I think he's already bitten off so much. I mean, the Twitter thing, I feel like he thinks is going to make his head explode as it is. He's working 120 hours a week or something he's mentioned recently. So if he's going to do a phone thing, he's going to want to do it right. He's not going to just delegate it completely to some engineers like he's delegating Boring Company. That's probably 5% of his time or something. He's probably delegated it mostly to a
Yeah.
bunch of engineers he trusts. But I would think a phone, he couldn't just delegate to people. He'd want to do it right and spend a significant amount of time to get the design right, all that stuff, the software right. And I don't think he's ready to commit to that right now on some big new endeavor. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, they have a partnership with T-Mobile. I mean, I wonder if there's something there. I don't know if T-Mobile has expertise to build phones or not, their own phones. I think they're just a service
Mhm.
provider, right? So
Yeah. They're like the land based network. I
yeah,
mean, I think now is definitely not not the right time to launch an iPhone competitor,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah.
All
But we
that
don't
we've spoken
know.
about so
We
far.
also don't know what's going on behind the scenes with the discussions with Apple. I mean, he just let out like, "Hey, Apple," like we don't know how serious Apple's trying to strong arm Twitter and Elon into doing whatever they're trying to get him to do to keep him on the App Store. I mean, was it just like a hint, or is Elon reading too much into some negotiation tactic by Apple, or is Apple really behind the scenes saying like, "We're going to take you off the App Store unless you do X, Y, and Z," and Elon's like, "Well, we can't do what I think is right if we do all those things, so I have to build a phone." You know, we don't know how far they are in that kind of strong arming with Apple and the App Store as kind of a
Yeah. I did see
hostage.
somebody in the comments said that Elon did delete that tweet where he said that going to war with Apple, and the car that was taking the exit. So I think
Okay.
if Elon actually did delete that tweet, which I believe whoever commented that, then I think that's a good sign that things are not going to escalate from here.
Yeah. So, good question. Next question is from Calistoker123 on Twitter. Could you guys please expand on Lemonade work ethic insights gathered from Investor Day? I think we had like a offhanded comment about, Lemonade last week where we mentioned that, we just don't know if they're as hardcore as like Elon's startups are. I don't know what they, we have concerns of anyone you should always have concerns of a company you feel bullish on. If you can't find the
Mhm.
concerns of a company you're bullish on, then you're not doing your homework, right? You can't just have rose colored glasses on any company. So with Lemonade, we think we love the stock, the potential opportunity for it, but there's always concerns with everything. And one concern, is maybe that, the culture there could be not it could be closer to what Twitter's culture was like before Elon came in. We're not sure. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know enough to. I haven't talked to the employees to know like, are they, getting super amazing perks that cost a lot of money? Like, I don't really know for sure. I mean, they're in New York City, a big office there, and
It was
you
a
know, the,
really nice office. I think that might have been part of where this was coming from. Was like the office was amazing. The employees seemed super happy, and that's not a
yeah,
bad thing. But
yeah,
to me, it kind of reminds me of when we interviewed those two Rivian bulls, and they were saying like we are asking about RJ Scaringe and like kind of contrasting him with Elon. Like Elon was
yeah,
sleeping on the floor, and we're like, do you think RJ would do that? And they're like, well, I think he's a little too bougie. Was the exact
yeah,
quote to like do that. And I think
yeah,
that might be the same sort of thing that we saw. Like they may be a little too comfortable to do like the really aggressive hard things to ensure that there's like a 99% chance that Lemonade survives. I think if they had to choose between like a comfortable life and 80% chance of Lemonade surviving and like a just like an insane aggressive work schedule, like 120 hours a week and 90% chance that Lemonade survives, I think they choose the 80%. So
yeah.
it might just be, on the margins, we're not so sure that they're in like 100% committed to seeing this thing through.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's just got to keep an eye on it. That's all. I mean, we talked to some people off the record before the investor day. One person had interviewed at Lemonade previously and mentioned that a similar concern when they interviewed with Lemonade, I guess. And so there's just little things to track and try to keep. That was like years ago when they interviewed with Lemonade. So, it doesn't mean that Lemonade is not going to succeed. No company's perfect, but you want to try to find the
Yeah.
potential holes in the company, put a magnifying glass on it, and make sure it's not a bigger hole. And so maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's just hearsay or rumors, or maybe we're reading too much into situations. But we certainly want to be paranoid about our bullish investments, right? I mean, it's better to be paranoid about Tesla demand than to just think it's always going to be amazing. So anyway,
Yeah. That's exactly right.
next question from Evan Glansman. What type of margins do you think Tesla can achieve in 2023 with the IRA kicking in, FSD recognition, and factories scaling? Oh, I mean, those are like perfect bullish points right there. I mean, I don't know. Rose-colored glasses, Matt. What do you think? I mean, now we're talking to the
Well,
echo chamber, and we're gonna just put the rose-colored glasses on and say,
I
and
mean,
this is realistic, but we're just gonna say, what do you think, Matt?
rose-colored glasses, and this is not my 50% base case, but I think
Okay.
rose-colored glasses, like gross margins of 35% plus, and operating margins of 20% or more, I think are possible. I
Mhm.
would not bank on those, but it would not surprise me if they just kind of continue to incrementally improve, and efficient, or like scale efficiencies continue to be realized, and FSD take rate goes up a little bit, plus it's recognizable, and like all those little things add up to just like kind of crazy margins. But I'm not banking on that. But I don't know, what do you think if you had to put on your rose colored glasses?
Yeah, my rose-colored glasses are a lot rosier than yours. I think I think that the margins could be like 50% with those things.
Woo.
Because I think the take rate could hit an inflection point where, rose-colored glasses by the end of Q4, by the end of 2023, the take rate could be 50% plus. And so if that's happening, I didn't put pen to paper, but I think the margins, on average, 50% plus in the US, that's an extra $7,500 per car, because $15,000. Maybe they even increase the price to 20,000, let's say. So that's an extra $10,000 of pure profit margins per car sold in the US if it's 50% take rate. So I think that, and then you get the manufacturing improvements, Austin ramping up, I could see like much higher margins with the color glasses. I would put that like 20% chance, but I think it's realistically possible. Not likely, but possible.
I could see that in 2024. I'd be skeptical that it happens as soon as Q4
Yeah.
of next year, but
Mhm.
I don't know. It's possible. I have to admit that that's possible.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let's do one more question. It's been about an hour. We try not to go over an hour much. So, last question is from Martin Muldoon on the YouTube comments. Question: what percentage of FSD data can be leveraged by the semi? They make larger turns. They must start braking sooner, etc. I think the actual data, some of it probably can be used for labeling, auto labeling maybe, but I think like you're right, the actual algorithms or the neural networks, weightings of how to make the turns or what how to react to certain labels will have to be very different. It'll be a different formula for to calculate the decisions, but the data I think will help tremendously that they've gathered already. So I think it'll be a fast curve. And I saw in the YouTube comments a guy Rocky Tillman, who had mentioned I think in an earlier comment that he used to work as a truck driver and he knows NHTSA well. He says take your rose-colored glasses off about driverless semis, which we talked about a lot early on. That I think it's possible, in the future, but I'm talking 10 years, 8 to 10 years in the future. Um, so, I don't think the semi truck's going to be fully self driving for a few years. There's going to be a lot of issues with regulations, of course, like NHTSA, like the guy Rocky Tillman mentions, but I think if they get enough data that for the regular cars, that's a stepping stone for the semis. It'll be the Model Ys, the Model 3s, the Model SX, the Cybertrucks. Those will be allowed for fully self-driving, autonomous driving before the semi trucks. I think, but once those are widely accepted, I think it opens the door for the semi trucks soon after if they can show that they're just as safe to be done. What do you think, Matt, about this question?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a longer rollout, like kind of like you're suggesting. I mean, one thing that stuck out to me was I think it was Ray for Tesla went to that Tesla exhibit at the Peterson Auto Museum, and said that there were actually two different sets of forward-facing cameras. So there were, I think it was like two cameras, maybe it was three in the top, and then three more down in the bottom, plus some different ones on the side. So just the frame rate is going to be different if they've got a different number of cameras, and so I think it's a whole different kind of perception, and like the planning for sure is going to be different. The perception is going to be a little bit different, I think, just based on the fact that they've got different hardware sets. So I think it's just reasonable to assume that with a different hardware set, and frankly with just way fewer semis out there than there are you know um, you know sedans and crossovers
Yeah.
on the road that Tesla has right now, that it's just going to take a longer time for the software on truck driving, which is a much more complicated like driving skill set. I think it's going to take longer for that to kind of get up to speed to the average, human truck driver.
Yeah, yeah. I see Rocky Tillman in the comments. I'm sure he's got good reasons for why NHTSA moves slow. But I can imagine a world. There's other factors at play here, and I can imagine a world where Tesla's becoming the biggest company in the world, and then let's say DeSantis wins the presidency for the next 4 or 8 years. Let's say that's not. I don't know what the odds are, like 25, 50% or something that he wins. I don't know, but if he wins for the first term and then he gets another term, let's say, he's heavily allied, it seems like, with Elon already. I don't know if you saw the clip about him, telling Apple that's how outrageous it would be that Apple would ever ban Twitter. He seems like he's heavily allied with Elon in a lot of ways. Elon's pushed for DeSantis already as his vote. And so I can see an administration in power that's saying, even though NHTSA might move slowly and do things a certain way, maybe not as aggressive as Donald Trump would move things, but an aggressive move by the administration in power saying, NHTSA, make this happen. This saves lives. Let's appoint a new head of NHTSA to make sure we can allow driverless cars quicker, So I could see a positive change, a white swan event, if you will, in terms of politics, if the right people were elected for Elon and his companies. So that's kind of an exciting thing to think about. And then one other thing is exciting is, I don't know if anyone's been following the World Cup, but there's a big match starting in like 20 minutes, US versus Iran. I mean, how crazy is that, right? I mean, that's what the Top Gun sequel is about, like these two countries that are like enemies fight. Now you have these two soccer teams of country, political. The people are so nice in Iran, and hopefully they think the people in the US are nice, but the people in charge of politics in Iran and the US seem to hate each other. And so it's an interesting matchup here, Iran versus the US. And I think the US, they win, they're in the next round. If they lose, they're not, or something. So I'm going to watch that a little bit. Yeah, I'm excited, and that's been part of the reason for the Chinese, the China protests is they saw all the people without masks on. I've seen that cited in some of the protest videos I watched, that people are like, even in the World Cup, people don't wear masks. What are we doing here in China, And so,
that is kind of crazy. Like even in an entirely closed society where like everybody around you is wearing masks, then all of a sudden, like you can't just like not show the crowd in a soccer match. And so like if it's just incredibly apparent that even in Qatar of all places that like, masks are not, worn by like 90% of the people, then like I could see that like prompting some sort of like, social unrest. So yeah, it's interesting. I haven't watched much of the soccer. I watched some of the highlights, but
it gives us the whole world something to kind of, calibrate on and center ourselves around a little bit. And, anyway, and it's terrible that women are not even allowed in the state. Women are being totally, it's terrible what happens, the rights women have in Iran. So I think this type of stuff helps bring light to that as well. And those protests in Iran should not be, undervalued. I think there's a lot of human rights. There's something, the world, everyone's got different ethics around the world, I guess, but there's a few things I think universal that I think everyone should agree on, and women's rights is one of them. So anyway,
Farzad's done a good job of kind of raising awareness about this, and he's Persian, so he's got I think a really strong background to kind of bring some awareness to this. But it's been a lot of stuff going on in the world, man.
Yeah.
You got Russia. Like, remember, like Russia and Ukraine was like the big, like shocking thing. It seems like every month now there's like another like just crazy, shocking macro, geopolitical development.
Yeah. I think the media is getting better and better at worrying us. They're getting better and better at attracting emotional stress when we see the headlines to click on it, So that seems to be happening. Hopefully we realize it collectively and don't turn into some mass panic society suddenly. So
yeah, definitely.
All right, guys. All right. We'll see you next week. And it was good chatting. And this is recorded on Twitter Spaces and our YouTube channel. So it'll show up right away once we close things down here. Thanks, guys. See you next week, same time.